As a principal, my one-on-one meetings with my teachers would be more focused and guided if I had this tool or we both had this tool on hand. However, as the NCBTS rolled out, there also came this explosion of tools. Forms upon forms of teacher development plans, self-assessment tables, school head consolidation sheets have blasted out of various levels of the DepEd. It goes to that ridiculous point where teachers are more preoccupied with form filling in the same way that they copy lesson plans year after year, rather than becoming more reflective about his or her career. Again, the TAIs have much to do in terms of aligning their programs with the NCBTS. Principals and school trainers will have a much easier time if graduates from our colleges are already oriented to the teacher standards so that the retraining costs and in-service training will significantly decrease over the next 3 or 4 years. Another agency that must keep abreast with these measures is the PRC, or the Professional Regulatory Commission. Needless to say, coherence across these institutions is imperative for the reforms to be actually enacted. Again, this shows that teacher development is everybody's business. Key Reform Thrust number 3 aims to achieve enhanced quality assurance through standards and assessment. It also seeks to improve learning outcomes and create social support for mechanisms that help promote student learning. The most prominent proposal, or controversial in Cynthia's words, to emanate from KRT3 is in relation to multilingual education, or what we call the MLE. Embodied in DepEd Order 74, Series 2009. It was further defined through strategic workshops. The use of the mother tongue as the learner or the learner's language as the first language of learning will probably see full-blown implementation by year 2012, once the requisite materials and curriculum are in place. The groups that advocate and support the steps towards MLE implementation are growing stronger every day. The MLE recommendations caught their imagination. Just 2 weeks ago, the effort resulted in the DepEd rallying its teachers to the first conference on MLE in Cagayan de Oro. Indeed, the DepEd has thrown its weight behind this proposal, and stakeholder groups have supported the DepEd vigorously. As a school principal, I would need immense support from all levels above my post in order to prepare for its implementation. More importantly, my teachers will need to be trained on effective transitioning from mother tongue to the other significant and valued languages of learning. Once again, it is necessary for TEIs to step up and prepare the new batches of teachers for teaching in the mother tongue. Beyond that, scores of English and Filipino teachers should be better trained on developing language and learning skills so that students will learn all the languages relevant to our local and global villages. The fourth key reform thrust finds enactment in the activities of the DepEd in relation to preschool or early childhood education and the strengthening of the alternative learning systems. With a large number of youth who have dropped out of school or who have conditions that prevent them from successfully navigating through a rigid traditional system, it is imperative that we provide alternate quality education options that a formal residential system cannot provide. Inclusion and accreditation schemes would be necessary for any school to provide such opportunities for diverse learners who may be those experiencing difficulties or those with talents and abilities that do not fall within the usual cadence and timing of a lockstep school system. Again, as a school leader, it will be my duty to open these avenues and thus widen the education window so that all these types of learners in my community can participate. To achieve this, schools need standards, not a table of skills to be learned. What learning competency should a student acquire and develop in order to meaningfully participate in various social and economic communities? Will schools be given the liberty to develop culturally appropriate curricula so children will find school relevant in their lives? If schools do not have the liberty to devise and create content and methods, in order to achieve competency standards, then it's clear that the one-size-fits-all mentality remains. Much can be argued and said about the top-down drilling down of a curriculum framework that requires resources beyond those available in all schools. A sensible school head would be the first person to acknowledge that there is no chance that these reforms can be implemented, supervised, and improved by one person alone. Therefore, the SIP should be the product of the synergy between school heads, principals, students, with the support from local communities and the guidance of the supervisory levels of the bureaucracy. Guidance can come in the form of supervisors who go beyond the perpetuation of the status quo, or worse, going back to what was before. Reminders and mechanisms that laud ethical practice, especially during testing seasons. Incentives for creativity in teaching and assessment procedures. Most importantly, teachers on the ground must know what the big picture is, so that all these small parts that are embodied in DepEd memos and orders actually make sense, lest we understand and misconstrue and thus miss the point. Just like the 6 blind men of Hindustan, disputed loud and long, each in his opinion exceedingly stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, and all were in the wrong. Change is never easy, especially in such a large situation. But all would be easier indeed if these reforms were all clearly linked to the BESRA, which is what all the reports for international consumption articulate as the cohering program. But as this presentation has shown, these are not explicitly communicated to those on the ground, to those who feel children's frustrations every day. The compartmentalized way that BESRA is being drilled down to the schools has similarities to how learning is sometimes viewed. That students will just simply pull together on their own without explicit instruction on how to do or how to reflect. That learning will just happen even if the content of a lesson is not matched to its objective, method, material, and assessment procedures. Similarly, it seems that principals and teachers are expected to simply infer the philosophy underlying the various activities and projects because these are assumed to result in improved learning outcomes. When discrete memoranda and orders are not explicitly linked to BESRA, then these fail to create a movement among the teachers who will implement all these cohering learning reforms. In my opinion, this is a pity, because BESRA, though not perfect, is a sound, research-based and innovative reform program that is the hope of redemption for learners in all communities, in all corners of our land. If there is one large gap in the BESRA that we must define or identify now, then it is its silence on the issues of the scope of the curriculum and whether the length of the basic education cycle or ladder should be increased from 10 to 12 years. But you know, this is a discussion I gladly pass on to Maris, who will now consider what reform-mindedness means in higher education. Thank you and good afternoon.